By the end of this video, you'll understand the difference between natural sensitivity and perfectionism, why so many highly sensitive people confuse the two, and what starts to change when you stop treating fear-driven pressure as part of your personality. In this video, you'll discover why many highly sensitive people assume perfectionism is simply part of being sensitive. The subtle moment when healthy caring and conscientiousness start turning into fear-driven pressure, and why things become less stressful when you learn how to care deeply without perfectionism running the system. Many highly sensitive people who struggle with perfectionism assume that it's just part of their nature. They think, I care a lot. I notice everything. I'm detail-oriented. I'm conscientious. And I like to do things well. So perfectionism can feel normal. It can feel even like you're being responsible. It may even sound like, I just have high standards, or I just care deeply. This is just how I'm wired. But there's an important distinction here. Not everything that looks like perfectionism is perfectionism. In fact, if it feels like pressure or stress, it's not coming from sensitivity, but from something else. Sensitivity naturally creates certain capacities. When you're a highly sensitive person, you have certain gifts. You're able to notice subtle details. You're able to notice small shifts and pick up on anomalies. You pay attention to nuance. You have the ability to see and feel emotional tone. And you can perceive possible problems before they even develop into real problems. You can see how things can be improved. So this often makes HSPs thoughtful and conscientious and very caring because of the empathetic nature of being an HSP, very perceptive and intentional. These are all strengths. These are part of your nature as being highly sensitive. Sensitivity often creates a natural desire to do things well, to be considerate of other people, to minimize unnecessary harm. That's what all this extra thinking is for. It's not off. There's nothing wrong with thinking, because we're thinking about how to avoid harm, how to not hurt others, not hurt ourselves, how to be considerate, how to really hit the target on whatever it is that we're working on. We like to think things through. And so none of this is inherently perfectionism. This is just healthy sensitivity. Caring deeply, wanting to do a good job, being passionate about doing something well, that is not the problem. Perfectionism begins when fear gets attached to the caring. Instead of just caring, there's some kind of fear in there, a fear of making a mistake. Now that sensitivity has crossed into another dimension. Now, if there's a fear of criticism coming, it's not just wanting to do a good job. It's a fear of being rejected maybe, or being hurt, or disappointing others. Or there's a fear of conflict, or a fear of failure, a fear of experiencing shame. So this changes the internal experience completely. Now caring becomes pressure. Now I use my strengths as a highly sensitive person to try to avoid the thing that I'm afraid of. So I may do a really, really good job, but I'm no longer doing it out of the love of doing a good job, out of my nature. I'm doing it to prevent any kind of problem, to prevent any disappointment from others or any conflict or any kind of shame or rejection. This fear-based motivation uses the qualities of high sensitivity, but it uses it with fear as the motive. And when fear is the motive, then stress is the byproduct. If fear wasn't there, if you weren't worried about making a mistake, then you would probably quite naturally try to do a really good job. But the difference would be you're not experiencing stress. So when fear enters the picture, the inner dialogue shifts. It goes from, I want to do this well, to, I can't mess this up. That's a huge difference qualitatively on the experiential level. It's not just, I want to do this well. There can be excitement in wanting to do this well. There can be energy there. There can be just this natural flow of creativity and just it's fun to do things well. But when fear enters that you might make a mistake, then perfectionism enters as, I can't mess this up. I can't even make one tiny error. I can't do anything that would raise an eyebrow. When that's there, this is what we call perfectionism. It's not what you produce. It's not how well you do something that determines perfectionism. It's what motivates your actions. If the motivation is your nature to do things well, then where's the stress? Where's the perfectionism? But if your motive is to avoid criticism or avoid failure, then it doesn't even matter how well you do it, you're going to feel stress all the way through, and it's going to be a kind of perfectionism that won't let you go. So, for example, when you're under the influence of perfectionism, you cannot rest. You will use every available minute to keep working on something until the deadline, because you have to try to avoid any kind of possibility of any crack that could open up and cause failure. Whereas if you're not motivated by perfectionism, fear, then you will do the job well, and you may use a lot of the time, but you could also step away going, I feel like I'm doing a good job. It's not like there is no perfection anyway. So that you can draw a line earlier and step away earlier with less stress. If fear is there, you cannot step away. You're compelled because of the fear of failure. So the dialogue inside can shift from, I care about how this affects people, to, I can't upset anyone. And that's a very impossible standard because everybody's on a different page. But that's what perfectionism does. It tries to manage everyone so that no one has any bad experience or any doubt or raises any criticism. That's perfectionism. Or instead of, I want to do my best, it's, this has to be right. And then you're just compulsively caught in the loop of trying to attain surety, like complete control, that you will not have any feedback that will hurt you. So this is the moment that sensitivity starts getting hijacked by fear. And this is when perfectionism begins. Perfectionism doesn't just affect behavior. It changes the whole nervous system. You'll notice there's a tightening, there's a pressure, there's an urgency, there's a fear. And you'll start noticing that you're thinking more. We as HSPs naturally think more, but now it will go into overdrive because fear is lighting a fire under our thinking, and it's going to just drive it. And we're going to get taken over by that thinking. You may also notice when this kind of perfectionism starts in, that procrastination may be an effect of it. Or second guessing yourself. And just as you're about to land somewhere, then you're like, well, let's just see, maybe there's another way to do it too. Difficulty deciding, same thing. It can even be a fear of finishing, because if you finish, then there's still the possibility that you missed something, and now there's no possibility of fixing that. So once again, fear is ruling. There's a constant self-monitoring and often harsh kind of self-criticism. So even after something is done, then the mind keeps working and wondering, was that okay? Did I miss something? Should I redo it? What do they think? So there's no real rest. That's the problem with perfectionism. There's no rest. And we as HSPs need rest. We need balance. We need to dive into doing something, do it well, and then we need to pause and take a break and forget about it. When you're under the influence of perfectionism, in other words, fear, you cannot rest. When, you can't sleep when your beds are burning. So that's the thing. Like there's somebody stalking you. There's the possibility of danger. You can't rest. So this is the main difference. Sensitivity, it will feel naturally deep. It will feel inspiring. It will feel motivating. You will enjoy doing a good job when it's based in sensitivity. Perfectionism, on the other hand, feels tight, and you will not enjoy it as much. There will be stress involved because fear is just around the corner. So sensitivity is like having a very responsive, finely tuned car. You can notice subtle changes in the road. You can feel everything. The car responds quickly. That's what it means to be an HSP. That's not the problem. Perfectionism, on the other hand, is like driving that same car with the parking brake partially engaged. Sure, you can still move forward, you can still function. Everything feels harder. There's a constant tension. There's more effort, more strain, more wear and tear. The problem isn't the car's sensitivity. The problem is the brake. That brake is fear. Fear of mistakes, fear of criticism, fear of failure. So this can show up anywhere. It can show up in your work. I want to do good work. Well, that's sensitivity. I can't make mistakes at work. That's perfectionism. It can show up in relationships. I care how this lands for the other person. I'm naturally empathetic. That's sensitivity. No stress there. But I need to say this perfectly. I can't handle it if they get upset. That's fear. And that's what drives us to overthinking and perfectionism. Or even in parenting, like I care deeply about my child. That's empathy. That's being highly sensitive. Perfectionism, on the other hand, I can't get this wrong. I better not mess up their future. Oh my God, what if this comes back to haunt me? Like now you can overgive, you can go into overkill trying to raise a child instead of being relaxed and naturally sensitive in that same occupation. So same external behavior sometimes with very different internal experience. That's why it's confusing. Perfectionism, we tend to think perfectionism as being what we produce, which may be very perfect. But there's two ways to create something that perfect. One is with a lot of strain and fear, which is perfectionism, and the other is with a lot of ease and joy. Both could have a really beautiful, amazing outcome, so you can't judge the outcome. You can only judge perfectionism by your internal experience. And stress, that's what tells you that you've gotten into that. So many HSPs tend to think that perfectionism is simply part of who they are. And then they assume that the only options are either stay stressed or become less caring. But those are not the only options. You don't need to become careless. You don't need to stop caring. You don't need to lower your sensitivity. The real issue isn't sensitivity, it's fear. So the next question is, how do you work with fear? And that's where inner work, like the work of Byron Katie that I love to do, comes in, where you can look at specific situations where perfectionism showed up, identify the fear. What were you actually afraid of? And then question that thought, allowing the fearful part inside of you to actually answer the questions, to do that inner work. And as it goes through that process, it can start to see things differently. That irrational, fearful part can start to see things differently. And when that happens, fear can shift and perfectionism falls away. In this video, we looked at why many highly sensitive people assume that perfectionism is simply part of being sensitive. And that is because the focus is on how well we're doing something. And in both cases, the outcome may be amazing. You may be doing something really, really well. But the difference, as we've seen, is that on the inside, one is completely stressed and the other is not stressed at all. We also looked at the subtle moment when healthy caring and conscientiousness start turning into fear-driven pressure. And that happens when the focus starts to be on not making a mistake, not doing anything wrong, trying to do it so that there will be no repercussions, no negative repercussions. And suddenly our attention is now on what we shouldn't do or what we have to avoid instead of what we love doing, which will naturally have its own momentum. And finally, we looked at why things become less stressful when you learn how to care deeply without perfectionism running the system. And that is when you naturally care as a sensitive person, you naturally have empathy, you naturally care about doing things well. When you allow your nature to just flourish, to run, then you are following something that is connected deep inside with a natural flow of energy. When, on the other hand, you're focused on avoiding something outside in someone else, some rejection or some fear of disapproval, then you disconnect from yourself, you lose that energy, and you try to do something that's actually impossible. You can never fully control the outside world. So the feeling I'm left with today is that sensitivity and perfectionism are two completely different things. As HSPs, we may tend to go out of balance in the direction of perfectionism more easily than others, but that doesn't mean that perfectionism is our nature. Perfectionism is driven by fear. If you can root out the fear, you'll be left with deep, caring, non-perfectionistic sensitivity, which is both highly competent and completely at ease.